Let's begin. Thank you all so much for joining us for the Culture, Heritage, and Arts Day at the Capacity Building Hub. My name is Daniel Cervenka. I run an organization called the Convergence, and we're one of the organizing partners along with the Entertainment and Culture Pavilion and UNFCCC and other incredible partners that are bringing this together today. Just a few short opening words to start the day, and we'll dive into our opening keynote. Thank you for your patience. This room is hard to find. It's a pleasure that we're gathered here today and with this opportunity to honor culture as a topic that should be more integrally included in climate action. This day invites us to examine deeper systems and that shape our collective responses to the climate crisis. Culture and heritage are central to that conversation. They influence how communities understand risks, how they adapt, how they rebuild, and how they sustain themselves during times of adversity. Today's program is designed to explore how cultural and creative dimensions of society can be systemically and systematically integrated into climate action. We'll hear from a broad range of speakers and engage in exciting performances later on today. But to open our discussion, I would love to welcome our keynote speaker, Vinicius Gortlur da Rosa. Vinicius, as a co-chair of a group of friends for culture-based climate action, and through his work, of course, at the Ministry of Culture of Brazil, has played a critical role in advancing the global momentum on culture within the UNFCCC process. His leadership helped to shape the Barcelona Declaration, among other things, and he supported the progress ahead of the global stocktake and contributed to the broader movement at large. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Vinicius to come take the stage and kick us off for today. Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause to Vinicius.
Well, hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. Thank you very much, Daniel. This is a pleasure to be here today with you. We'll have a full day, and it's an honor to deliver this opening speech. First of all, I would like to say that I have to pay due respect for the commitment and the although hard work that has been put forth by many, many people. So I would like to acknowledge here the important contribution that we have had so far inside the Ministry of Culture of Brazil. My colleague here, Carlos Paiva, who is my fellow and my colleague pushing this agenda in the Ministry of Culture of Brazil, by the leadership of our Minister Margarete Menezes, who is a staunch supporter for culture-based climate action. But also, I would like to just acknowledge the work of my colleague and fellow co-chair Mahnaz Fancy from the Emirates, who couldn't be here today, but has been alongside Brazil in this strategy to embed culture in climate policy. So it is for me a great honor to open this Culture and Heritage Arts Day here at COP30. The first COP where culture finally takes its rightful place at the center of climate governance. I am deeply grateful to the UNFCCC, the Paris Committee on Capacity Building, and all the partners, including the Convergence and the Entertainment and Culture Pavilion, who helped bringing us here in Belém to this place. Today I speak not only as a representative of the Brazilian Ministry of Culture, but also on behalf of the co-chairs of the Group of Friends for Culture-Based Climate Action, a coalition that is now has now over 50 countries and over 25 knowledge partners. Some of them here in this room, some Very, very happy to see some familiar faces. And the main point that we try to make here is that the climate crisis is not only environmental, but it is fundamentally cultural. And this idea, we hope that it can be transformative. This is the idea and the agenda that we're carrying into COP30. So as we are here today in Belém, in the heart of the Amazon region, the world's largest biocultural region, I hope that we can, during this day, get this message strengthened and to get it across to the other side of the room, to our negotiators. As you know, around the world, cultures are fraying under the pressure of a warming planet. UNESCO's recent thematic paper, Culture and Climate Action, From Margins to Mainstream, describes this reality with clarity and urgency. Rising sea levels are swallowing sacred sites. Extreme weather is destroying museums, archives, and historic cities. Desertification and ecosystems are collapsing and eroding traditional knowledge systems, languages, and rituals. Communities are losing not just assets, but also identities, memory, and belongings. And we've seen this year in Brazil, we've seen this in Spain, we've seen this many places around the world. So these are not only economic, but mostly non-economic losses. The loss of heritage, of spiritual connection, and ways of life. And when communities lose their culture, they lose part of their resilience. And this is an intangible strength that ties people together and allow them to face crisis with dignity and purpose. This is why addressing climate change demands more than technological solutions. It demands a cultural transformation. The paradox is that culture is not only vulnerable and is a part of the necessity for adaptation, but it is also a resourceful tool for climate action. And this is why we are trying to show throughout our work inside the group of friends, and now I will provide more information ahead of my presentation, but what we see here is that culture can strengthen adaptation and resilience. We see that traditional water systems in arid regions in the UAE, they contribute to adaptation. We see indigenous fire management systems and practices in Australia also. Pacific navigation knowledge that reads the winds, the currents, and the stars, and seasonal calendars and agricultural practices that are refined over millennia and that rely on cultural practices. Culture also contributes to mitigation. Heritage forests within the UNESCO sites, they store about 13 billion tons of carbon, so they are true carbon sinks. And restoration of cultural landscapes often restores ecosystems at the same time. So we see that UNESCO sites and forests, they are a huge supporter for climate action. The arts, they also do what data cannot do alone. They change the hearts and minds. Museums, they make climate science tangible, and we have seen it. There are many scientific papers on that, how visitors to a museum, they get the message across much easier than if they had to read a scientific paper on the impacts of a certain aspect of climate change. Furthermore, artists, they give shape to emotions in the face of crisis. So they help build resilience and community ties. Storytelling, media, we see the music, movie industry, festivals, digital culture, they all rely on culture to transform and bring awareness and action. So culture is essential to justice. Indigenous peoples, Afro-descendant communities, local communities, they are not only vulnerable, but they are also leaders in this process. And we've seen here in Belém, we've seen the mutirão, we've seen the Amazon, the parade, we've seen how this COP here in Belém has truly been the COP of the people. And this is important. I think it provides a powerful message that no climate solution will be feasible and effective if it doesn't include the component of the people. So we have to look at that. So, colleagues, we are now seeing a turning point in the global climate discussions. And we are at a time where culture is now being more visible in the global climate governance, in the architecture. Allow me please to highlight some of the major breakthroughs that we had in the past years. So at COP27 and COP28, we had the recognition of culture heritage as part of the Sharm el-Sheikh and Dubai program, and we had the inclusion of loss and damage also, and adaptation. At COP28, we saw the approval of the UAE to Belém work program on indicators and the global goal on adaptation, which features a specific goal, a standalone goal on culture and heritage, which now is being discussed, and we're seeing this is one of the deliverables of this year's COP, as our negotiators are currently now engaged in conversations to see if we can approve a set of indicators, and there will be hopefully 2 indicators for culture and cultural heritage. Also, we saw at COP28 the inauguration of this multilateral cooperation through the Group of Friends for Culture-Based Climate Action. So we had now already 3 ministerial meetings of the Group of Friends. The last one was in Barcelona during Mondiacult in September this year, and it brought together over 25 ministers of culture and several knowledge partners, and we managed to approve the Barcelona Declaration. This declaration emphasizes 3 key aspects. Culture matters for climate action. It matters systematically, not only symbolically. Countries, they must advance in integrating culture and cultural heritage into their national adaptation plans. So this is a very important topic. I will also further develop on it. And third, culture is now part of the action agenda of the UNFCCC, integrating Axis 5, Key Objective 19 on culture, cultural heritage, and climate action, which provides a pathway for us to strengthen culture in the run-up to the next global stocktake, which is due in 2028. So we see now this as an opportunity because now we are able to follow a process inside the UNFCCC, which ensures that throughout 2028, we will see culture and cultural heritage being a part of an action agenda focused on implementation. So this, I believe, is the most important takeaway from this year's COP for the cultural sector, I would say. But mostly, we must do our efforts at the national level, at the local level. So I really hope that this session today will also provide an opportunity for us to look at what is really needed in the cultural sector in terms of capacity building, in terms of building evidence and research, so that we can also bridge these two areas, climate and culture. We must act not in silos. We must speak the language of the scientific, of the climate negotiators. We must make them also aware, sorry, we must make them aware of the intricacies and the specificities of the cultural sector. So we must try to bridge these two gaps, these two areas. So this means that we must focus on building capacity and coordination. We must have technical guidelines, indicators, thank you, assessment of current NAPs, and we must also unlock finance. Culture is systematically underfunded, and we urgently need to make sure that we have funding available for cultural heritage, so we can preserve cultural assets and living heritage, so that we can support indigenous governance systems, knowledge systems, and that we can finance the green transition in the culture and the creative sector. So, one of these aspects that we see is that there is a push and a need for us to develop more on the indicators list. I would say that culture, by its nature, has a more qualitative approach. So it is, this is a challenge for all of us, policymakers, inside government and also other institutions. We must make sure that we can rely on data, on evidence, to build solid indicators, but these indicators, they must also speak the truth about the territory and about the heritage sites. So we must try to strike a balance between not only the needs for these heritage sites, but also how can we build indicators that will be related to living heritage, for example. So there are many, many challenges in terms of how we collect this data, how we can make sure that governments and institutions, they can really base their policies on this kind of measurements. One of the things that I believe it's crucial and key in this process is that we also support evidence-based research and monitoring inside the IPCC. So as you know, the IPCC is the intergovernmental panel made up of 195 national governments, and it's a board, they have a board that is responsible for all the scientific, technical, and socioeconomic information relevant to understanding the human-induced climate change. And a decision taken in February by the IPCC included culture and cultural heritage in the AR7 reports. And now, over the next 4 years, the IPCC will be able to produce knowledge on culture and cultural heritage and climate action. So, in the past, culture and heritage have been really poorly reflected in the IPCC. But now, at the AR7, we do have an opportunity for this body of knowledge to be built. So this is a breakthrough, is an important breakthrough. However, we must make sure that the experts that are called to produce these reports, that they are geographically diverse, that we see different parts of the world reflected in this work. This is also the case for the indicators inside the GGA. We must make sure that the experts that are working with these kind of indicators, that they reflect also the diversity of regions, of geographic regions and situations. So are not only speaking of built heritage, but living heritage as well. Well, finally, I would just like to emphasize once more how culture in the creative sector and cultural heritage, they are powerful means to mobilize communities, to inspire behavioral change, and make climate risks tangible, tell stories of resilience, and imagine futures beyond crisis. If we wish to build a climate-positive society, we must build a culture of climate responsibility, also through education, storytelling, arts, media, design, imagination, which will rely on the power of culture and cultural heritage. So, to face the climate crisis, we must transform not only energy, transportation systems, but we also must change our cultural systems. Culture is the true missing link between science, policy, and society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vinicius, and thank you for this holistic overview of the current state of where culture policy is. We'll dive further momentarily into our panel discussion where we'll explore this in more depth. And with the keen eye on the time, I'm going to cut my personal remarks shorter and jump straight into the invitation of our panelists to the stage. I would love to start by inviting Ave Paulus, a heritage and climate resilience expert who serves on the ICOMOS Climate Action Working Group focal point, president of ICOMOS Estonia, and her work focuses on cultural heritage, community-based knowledge, and climate adaptation policy and practice. Thank you for joining us, Ave. A short, small round of applause, please, for our speakers. I would love to invite Carlos Paiva, as a senior advisor to the Ministry of Culture of Brazil, with his extensive experience in cultural policy and creative sector development at a national level. And last, but most certainly not least, joining us online, and perhaps we can have our third speaker show on the screen, will be Malini Mera, with over 30 years of experience spanning civil society, diplomacy, climate governance. She has helped to shape international policy. And she, among other things, is also known as one of the founders of the London Climate Action Week. So she'll be here contributing her perspective through that lens. So Malini, thank you so much for being with us online. Thank you. Hello, hello. Malini, can we hear you well?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly, Daniel.
Fantastic. Could we get Malini a little louder in the room, please? Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ave, Carlos, Malini. Thank you all for being here with us today. We've heard from Vinny a fantastic overview of the current state of affairs, if I could put it that way, when it comes to culture and culture-related policies. But let's dive deeper. There's lots to explore, and we have some time to unpack some of the points that were made by Vinny during his intervention. And to kick us off, I'd love to invite you just to very briefly introduce yourselves. Just share with us sort of where you're coming from, your background, just so that our audience can get to know you a little bit. But Carlos, if you want to kick us off, please, and we'll go around.
So I'm from Brazil. Sorry. I'm from Brazil. I've been working in cultural policy since 2001, so quite a long time. Mainly in funding policies for arts and culture, and I was brought into this agenda in COP28 when our minister took the co-presidency in Dubai, and since then I've been learning and contributing to one of the, from my point of view, the key agendas we have on our time and the role that culture can play in it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Ave, please.
I'm so thankful to be here. I am Ave Paulus. In COP30, I represent International Council of Monuments and Sites. I'm a focal point of Climate Action Working Group, and we are experts on cultural heritage, architects, conservation architects, historians, specifically already dealing 60 years with the cultural heritage matters, and over 20 years almost 20 years with climate action. We declared 2020 climate emergency and the importance of cultural heritage in climate action.
Thank you so much for sharing. And Malini, could we invite you please to share a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, it feels like being on the radio because, of course, I can't see anything. So you can probably see me on the screen, but I can't see anyone, but I can hear you. And from the depth of the applause, I can tell it's a big room. So I'm joining you from London. And I'm sorry I can't be in Belen in person, but my grateful thanks to Daniel and to all the organizers for having created this special day. In response to your question, Daniel, so I guess the best way to connect with the question is that I'm Indian. I was born in Delhi. I was born in a very, very old and ancient city, lived in some of the oldest and ancient cities, Banaras, Calcutta in India, and grew up with culture as a way of life, surrounded by very, very ancient artifacts. So this is a very kind of integral conversation to have for me. It's part of the spaces in which we grow up in which we live. We see very ancient things. Not everyone, of course, those people who are born in more modern cities wouldn't necessarily have the same connection. But for me, that is part of my history, my culture. I live now in one of the oldest cities in the world. London is more than 2,000 years old. It's like the proverbial onion. There is so many layers of this city. I'm very close to the river right now, the River Thames. It's a sacred river. There is so much to share with you in the time that we have about the way in which we in London have engaged the issue of culture, the theme of cultures in our engagement with people and communities on climate change. But I'll say more about that when it comes to our mini presentation. So back to you, Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Malini. And I think now from these brief introductions, you also may be able to gauge a little bit the different levels at which we'll be exploring this conversation. We have Carlos here representing sort of the national perspective, Ava with, I mean, kind of throughout really, but I would love for you to pick up on some of the more on local solutions, and then Malini kind of on the regional, the city level, and we'll ebb and flow and as this dialogue unfolds. But thank you again for joining us. So. To continue on kind of this discussion about the policy level, I just want to kind of open the floor with a first discussion. If there was one policy innovation that could immediately unlock greater capacity for us and for culture to build that bridge between the culture and climate nexus, what could it be? What would be the main thing that you see that could help us advance fast right now? Maybe we'll start with Carlos and we'll go around.
Well, working from government, everything is a political process. So if you put culture on the highest level of the political agenda, things will follow. And that's what we're trying to do when our minister is personally engaged in this theme. She follows up very closely. When she was not being able to be in our Senate review, for example, was heartbreaking for her. And being here in COP for 1 week in a very busy schedule back in Brasilia shows her support to the agenda. So anything that, because when she does that, every other political actor inside the ministry pays attention and start doing something related to climate. Everyone in civil society says, okay, I think they know what they're doing, and we might not, but they think we do. And they start acting and behaving in that direction. Other ministers start to do so. I think that's like the starting and the key point for anything that follows.
Interesting. So it seems like the first policy innovation that we can make is actually engaging people directly and getting them more involved in the process. Maybe I'll pass now to Malini. Malini, what do you think could be perhaps the first or policy innovation that could help us engage better and create a better bridge between culture and climate, perhaps on the city level?
Yeah, so I think one of the most practical things that needs to happen is when you've got various departments, whether it's at the level of a city or in the government, that there be a policy commitment to working together across departments. So interdepartmental engagement on the climate and sustainability agenda is, I think, the most important. It's something that I've worked on in government. It's something that we are trying to promote in the City of London. And without there being a clear policy commitment, it can be very discretionary and very ad hoc. So I think making it quite explicit in policy is something that I'd like to see and that we're working towards.
Beautiful, thank you. Ave, what are your thoughts?
I echo both panelists. Cultural heritage needs to have a strong place in international policies as well as local, national policies, and it must be multi-level action. There is no question about that. It from community level up to the most highest international policies, and that's what the state parties are negotiating at the moment there. So let's hope cultural heritage 9G stays in, and with great indicators that will be refined in the expert level discussions later. And at the secondly, multi-stakeholder action, local communities, scientists, policymakers, and that is all enabled when the cultural heritage is in climate action. At the moment, it is still not fully there. So let's hope it happens now.
Fantastic. So I've heard cross-sectoral collaboration, cross-department, multi-stakeholder collaboration seems to be the key. That's, I think, part of our kind of advancements that we need to reach. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper on the different levels. Carlos, again, I'm going to pass the word to you, but on the national level, what were some of the mechanisms that have proven to be effective in advancing the integration of culture into the climate policies, perhaps here in Brazil, or if you want to speak a little bit broader as well, you're very welcome to.
So actually, the national the adaptation plan that we had to develop the goal and the indicators was very hands-on thing that we had to integrate culture, tourism, cities, and of course the environmental ministry. So just having UNFCCC COP mandate for us to do that gave us the space to do that. That'll definitely be the main one. But what we are doing here at COP and pre-COP, bringing the debate, showing the value of culture. We just came from a panel at the Ethical is Talk Take with people from the Ministry of Environment. Very impressed. So that building the environment to bring the attention, I think is also very important, because that's going to develop and follow up with very different collaborations. So those will be the two things that come to mind.
Could I just quickly follow up? You mentioned the stock take. Could you add a little more context to that? Like what that could look like if we were to advance in that direction?
So the global is stock take, ethical is stock take was actually an initiative of the Ministry Marina da Silva. This is something very dear to her. She thinks that the ethical dimension of the problem is central, and our President Lula follow up on that. And it's really hard to have a conversation about ethical values without somehow touching in some kind of cultural aspect. So when you go into that path, culture comes to center easily. The original ones, all of them, they instructed that they could read a poetry, sing a song, have a dance. So there was already designed in how we have to reflect on that. And over here, bringing artists and creators, the way they spoke about climate, about the challenges, I think is very different from what they hear in the other panels. And I could see by their faces that they were lighten up, fired up at the same time. So we always bring value to the table, but we always kept far from the conversation. So as we get closer, I think naturally, organically, that's gonna follow up many more collaborations, not only the NAP goal indicator, so both things, yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for unpacking that a little bit further. Ave, I'll pass now the word to you. And I'd love to maybe unpack a little bit more incorporation of local and indigenous knowledge. What does that look like within sort of the climate instruments? And how can this be done ethically also?
That is central in the negotiations about what is missing. Which voices are missing? It is exactly this global knowledge of us, our previous generations, and which look the future towards the future, which means that actually cultural heritage and traditional knowledge they are inseparable from heritage communities, and that is exactly. Which is stated to be implemented in the global goal of adaptation 9G target, and it is at the moment there are discussions how to define it, but what is at how to protect it. But we should not see not only as something to be protected, but that is a part of solution as well. I myself, now I put the hat of my local knowledge. I'm myself from the traditional coastal community of Estonia. There are not many of us Estonians. There are 1 million around. and we do have Pohiranna dialect. And Pohiranna culture, which is all about the knowledge of the coastlines and seas. And it is different in Sami areas, it is different all over the world. And that is exactly the low-scale culture that keeps the environment around that, not extractive culture. And that is when Vinicius pointed out that is a cultural crisis. Actually, the solution is cultural as well, looking towards small-scale, local heritage, community-led actions. And that is one of the plans of accelerating solutions as well, as a great coalition of heritage institutions are gathered together to promote Heritage That Adapts campaign, where we exactly promote this community-led solutions based on traditional knowledge in climate action. But that is the second panel already. Yeah.
No, this is great, and kind of connecting the two pieces together. You know, the global ethical stocktake, I feel like, provides ability for people to kind of feel more included and have access and be considered as part of this broader, more high-level dialogue. And now you raise the importance of this. Of the engagement of the local communities. Now, I'd love to pass this to Malini and actually hear a little bit more on how cities, I suppose, could play a role in this context and how we could perhaps better support the regional authorities in deploying culture-based approaches as well.
Thanks very much, Daniel. So I just want to give a bit of background, history, because it's not as if we're having this conversation for the first time in history, yeah, or in the age of climate activism. So I want to bring us back to where we were 30 years ago, when we had local communities very active on sustainability and climate issues. Because of course, in 1992, when we had the Rio Earth Summit, the flagship report that came out of the Rio Earth Summit was Agenda 21. And Agenda 21 was made implementable in communities, in cities, through local Agenda 21. So when I became really active on these issues in the early 90s, we already had local Agenda 21. The 28 chapters of Agenda 21 to act as a guide for us on how to engage our communities, people. So it's not as if the issue of mass mobilization is anything new. We have been doing it for more than a generation, and more people need to know about that. So and I want to give you a few examples of that type of community engagement. So in 1997, we had COP3. We are now in Berlin, it's COP30. But culture has always been engaged in the way in which we create the iconography of climate action. And so I've got a prop here that I want to show you.
Please.
Can you see this? You can
We
see
can,
this.
yes.
You know what it is. So this is probably the most famous, the most reproduced image in art history. And it is, of course, the Great Wave of Kanagawa. It is a wood print that was created in 1831 by Japan's most foremost artist, Hokusai. And this image actually happens to be in the British Museum. But in 1997 at COP3, which was hosted by the Japanese government, they used this image for COP3. And people in Japan immediately could connect with it. It was very relatable, but the world could also connect with it because it's such an iconic image. And this image, of course, the one that I've held up to you, is one that I got from the British Museum because there is a copy of this in the British Museum. And I'm going to bring that story up to date, but I do want to mention a few examples of how culture has been, how we have embedded it in climate action for many, many years. So if I go back to 1997 was a very important year because it was the first 5-year review. Now we have embedded the 5-year ratchet mechanism in the Paris Agreement, but it actually comes from many, many years ago when we had the first 5-year review, which became a 5-yearly cycle of Agenda 21. And in 1997, when we held the first ever review, it was held in the United Nations. I was working with Friends of the Earth International at the time, and we created a special ice sculpture. It was the first ice sculpture exhibition of its time called Melt, and it showed figures which we placed outside the United Nations headquarters in New York. We had about a dozen figures which were all in humanoid form, about 7 feet tall, and the display was called Melt because it showed in humanoid form what was happening with the warming climate. This is in 1997. You know, in 1997, also at Kyoto, we deployed cultural art forms which are specific to Japan, such as the tea ceremony. We had special ceremonies in temples. So none of what we're doing is new in practice. What we need to do is deploy it much more widely through the whole of state and the whole of society mobilization. So I want to give a few examples on how we have done that at London Climate Action Week, because culture is a very integral part of how we engage and mobilize people. We've been doing since 2019. And one of the ways is, I'm going to just give you a few examples, so please just bear with me, but it takes this conversation from policy and abstraction to reality. Because in London, we are blessed. We have a very, very strong and engaged and committed arts ecosystem. We also act as, as a magnet for the arts communities around the world. So there are a lot of people who are thinking about how to use the arts much more effectively for climate action. So in the very, very first London Climate Action Week, which was in June 2019, the very first event that we held was in the Palace of Westminster. This is one of the 4 cultural heritage, UNESCO cultural heritage places in London. In the Palace of Westminster, in the House of Commons, we organized the first ever event at London Climate Action Week, and it began not with a politician, it began with a spoken word artist. We invited the winner of that year's Roundhouse National competition on the spoken word, a young woman, to come and say the first few words, and she had created a special spoken word poem for that occasion. She did so standing in front of a very particular artwork, which was created by an artist called Bambi, who is often referred to as the female Banksy. And it was an artwork featuring Greta Thunberg. And that particular artwork, which had its first viewing in Parliament in the Palace of Westminster, then spent the rest of the week in London at a secondary school where it became, because it featured Greta Thunberg, and given that it was London, the first London Climate Action Week, it became the focal point for a discussion about climate change. We also deployed arts and drama. We had a special production of Noah's Flood, which is an operetta by Benjamin Britten. Usually it's held at the English National Opera, but that year it took place in Stratford, which is part of the east of London. And we worked with a local school there to help understand what this theme of the flood, what this meant, and what storytelling, how it could be used, how myth could be used to bring a different understanding of climate and climate impact, the impact in particular of floods, which are the most common ways in which people die as an impact of climate change. So all of these ways we've worked with Tate Modern, big exhibition with Olafur Eliasson. This year we had events at the Globe Theatre, but I want to just end with two specific examples, one of which actually came to mind through something that Eva was talking about. Now, this, as I mentioned, is at the British Museum. But in 2020, when COVID happened, so we worked with all of the museums in London. We worked with the British Museum, and they were doing a special exhibition they had that year, just opened in March, April, and it was about climate and the Arctic and the impact of climate change on the peoples of the Arctic, the cultures of the Arctic. And so we brought that into our learning lessons, which we produce every year for schools. We have a special London climate curriculum. And we brought, even though COVID then hit and the museum itself was closed down, because they had digital resources, we were able to bring those digital resources into the online learning of schools during London Climate Action Week. And so there was a whole discussion by taking place amongst young people in the context of schools about what, how climate is impacting the various different forms of cultural expression and cultural realities in the Arctic Circle. The last example that I want to leave with you, there are two actually, just to bring it completely up to date. The first is in honor of Brazil. So at this year's London Climate Action Week, we held a very special exhibition. We also have a huge focus on fashion, but we had a very special exhibition called Reweaving Amazonia, which focused on sustainable fashion in Amazonia. And we worked with the Brazilian embassy on this, with the Instituto Arapiao, and we were able to, with their help, bring the work of indigenous designers and the diaspora communities, where we showcased some amazing garments which revealed a very different use of materials, a very different use of design, very craft-oriented, a way in which to show sustainable fashion from Amazonia. So a very different storyline than one is accustomed to usually. So that is now is hopefully going to be a permanent feature of London Climate Action Week, where we have this partnership with the Brazilian embassy. But the other thing is, and I want to take it back to Kyoto. So this year in London, there was an absolutely smash hit play, which opened in Soho in the West End, and it was called Kyoto. And it's a political thriller. It was about the negotiations of that time, and it was the most brilliant way of bringing those negotiations from COP3 1997 to life in a theatre in London. And at London Climate Action Week, we started the week by bringing one of the two playwrights to the London Stock Exchange and having a discussion about how art is now reinterpreting through the medium of culture, the issues around climate change, around why the commitment to net zero matters, And we had a special discussion on this with those of us who had also been at Kyoto. So we were bringing in from a campaigner's perspective, a policy perspective, how how climate and policy meet, but we had the playwright also bringing in how culture interprets climate. So I just wanted to share those examples. There are many, many more examples I can bring to the table, but I realize we're short of time. So I'm going to hand back to you on that note. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you so much. This was a fantastic kind of overview of different examples, and I just want to I'll let our other panelists also to react to this. But I also wanted to add a personal reaction to this. One, I really appreciate this kind of the depth of integration of cultural practices and arts and entertainment into the Climate Action Weeks. One, that's maybe a conversation for another time of how we can do that more strategically across the Climate Weeks that are now opening up around the world. There was one happening in Rio, there's one in Bangkok, we have one in Venice, in Prague, and all over the world. So how can we have a broader dialogue about how we can do this? One, that's for another time. But two, I just wanted to add, I'll pass the word right to our panelists. But one thing I wanted to mention as a more of a personal observation about the inclusion of art and culture within the COP process. For those that were in Baku last year, perhaps you may have mentioned running from the plenary to the other sections of the Blue Zone, there was I would dare to say, quite an exceptional photography exhibit in one of the main hallways. But what was the problem? It was placed in a hallway where no one was meant to stop. It was in the middle of a highway of humans. And if you even dare to stop, you get knocked down by the flood of people passing you by. So now, I think, and then I'll pass the word back, and we're going to talk about kind of removing, arts and culture from the symbolic position and putting it more as an integral part of policies in our last part of the panel. But, that particular exhibit felt like a fantastic example of how symbolic and just sort of it was added for perception. It wasn't there for impact, even though it could have. And there were spaces within the Blue Zone that were dead zones, empty corners where people were sitting. There was no benches included. Can we change that? Is there a way then which we can include this more integrally into the process and allow that to happen so that people can have this sort of impact and influence on them through those artworks throughout the space? Anyway, wanted to add that as just a personal note and experience. But Ave, please, I'll pass it to you to react, and Carlos, of course, please do so as well.
I answer your questions, the first one included. I must applaud exactly both questions about how we raise the importance of cultural heritage. I must applaud Brazil. Because exactly on the preparations, you had time to prepare for Belém, and local communities, scientists, international communities, actors had time to prepare. And what I have witnessed this year has been magnificent as it comes to the multi-stakeholder involvement in action in state level, in Brazil, in the level of Brazil. ICOMOS Brazil, together with IFAN and several other actors, made the Brazilian Charter on Cultural Heritage and Climate Action, fabulous charter on the 7 biomes of Brazil, fabulous document. Then on the city level, we have green paper of Belém. In 2023, International Scientific Committee of Cultural Landscapes, together with several stakeholders, IFAN, local municipality, 180 pages of green Belém with 80 authors. International authors included. And now the Adoption Award winner, Salvador Bahia Contemplé, small communities, small religious communities, keeping and continuing the heritage, descendants from Africa. If those small communities in Salvador can keep the culture and could keep the cultural identity throughout several hundreds of years, we have the hope. Bravo.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So clap for Brazil. Please, Carlos, any thoughts you'd like to add?
I think there are two principles that's important to think about, because as central governments, we are really far away from the ground, and we have to be humble about that place. Those who know how to best implement especially if it's culture, it's going to be either city government, maybe state, but definitely city government, and artists, NGOs, communities. So mostly what we have to do as central governments is, again, put it on the agenda with a very high level importance, maybe, if needed, make the means, and means can be information, and can be financial resources, any other kind of material resources, but the texture, the taste of it is going to be local. So it has to be a lot of room for the local policymaker, the city official, know how to translate it in the local challenges, or the artistic or cultural community to speak which challenges are they facing and how they can find their solutions. So I think those two principles is very important when you think about integration, culture, and climate change. Actually.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'll second also Ava's comments on, I mean, here we feel it. We feel the presence of the local communities. We feel that in much more than perhaps we may have in the past. So I think we have examples to learn from and different pathways and places to integrate better into. So I'm really excited to continue that. And now, with a little bit of time that we have left, I wanted to talk now about the future. We talked about some of the historical solutions, and Malini, thank you so much for your intervention. That was really a phenomenal overview of some of the kind of key cultural moments and actions that have happened throughout the past. But what's next? Where do we go from here? How do we advance? What are the strongest opportunities sort of for cross-sectoral collaboration and multi-stakeholder collaboration in the next 1 to 2 years? Maybe let's look at something tangible. What can we do next? How can we take a good step forward from where we are today, already strengthened by the support of Brazil, but how can we continue further? Ave?
It is about policies, because actually we do have great small-scale solutions all over the world. It is about magnifying the effect as well as implementing them strongly into the policies in the cultural heritage-based solutions, in the national adaptation plans, because nature-based solutions are there. Culture-based solutions have the same spot, actually, that gives strength to the voice of culture too. At the moment, they are exactly these small specific examples, because of the overall international policy is still lacking the element of culture. Let's hope the change is being done now in the other rooms there. Yeah.
Carlos?
What I miss most, because again, artists has been a part of conversation for a long time because they are political actors. Yes. So they are important because of that as well. But I feel that we lacked policy. The life was going on, artists were doing, communities were doing their things, but we lacked policy that could organize the debate, support their work. But it's very recent. Of course, you have like the UK, who has more like a 10-year history of doing some work on that, some other countries, but most other countries, and I can speak from Latin America at least, are start doing that work now, and I feel not exchanging enough. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Of course, you're not gonna import solutions that sometimes are not applicable to our context, but I feel like having a good panorama, like overall view of who is doing what or thinking what, and trying to distill what's like a good instance, anchoring points for us to think about. That would be, I think, both local and global next step.
I love that. And Malini, I'm going to pass the word to you in a second. But I wanted to also touch back on something that Vinny has mentioned, which is the importance of evidence in the context of these sort of policy integrations, right? And I'll pass this to Malini, and we can touch on that a little bit more and close on that subject, because you also just mentioned kind of understanding the landscape and who's doing what and where. And how that can play a role. But Malini, could this be Could this be better integrated perhaps into the Climate Week frameworks and to the programming? And can we use that as a platform to collect more understanding and evidence about what's being done and how the cultural stakeholders are engaging around the world on a local level because of this distributed network of activities around the world?
Yeah, the answer is yes and yes. Let me just begin
yes,
by
that sounds great.
recognizing, yes, let me begin by recognizing that actually most of the recent hosts of a COP have actually integrated arts, culture, history in their own narrative. And it is, if I think back to Azerbaijan last year, in the main corridors, as you went from the entrance to the plenary, for example, there was a very large exhibition space in which there was a display of carpets, of paintings, of ceramics, of garments, which spoke to the way in which nature in particular was reflected in Azerbaijani arts and culture. It was there in music. So this is something that when you are a COP host and you are thinking about how to project the best in your country, your heritage, people are bringing that into the visualization, the visual identity of a COP. So very important to recognize that because it didn't always used to be this way. COPs in the past were seen as very technocratic conferences, yeah? Now they're being seen as an opportunity to showcase the cultural response also to climate change. Secondly, I think that there is already a process in place. 2 years ago in the Parliamentary Pavilion at COP28, we hosted a really interesting conversation around climate and cultural heritage. It was very much from the lens of the protection of cultural heritage as part of the impacts of climate change, the kind of adaptation agenda. But in terms of where we are now, so I think the only thing that's really lacking is creativity and imagination. When we started London Climate Action Week in 2019, nobody needed to tell us that we have to go and talk to the arts community. I mean, I spent months and months going to talk to the key cultural actors and the institutions, many of which are international, which are based in London, because I wanted to engage them in London Climate Action Week, because that was part of our whole commitment to engaging every institution, every community. So that's part of where, that's our DNA, that's in our DNA. And, it doesn't mean that it's a special gift to have. I mean, anybody can do this. All it takes is a creative way of looking at what one's assets are, and to do so in a non-doctrinaire, non-political way so that everybody feels engaged. In terms of what we're doing through the Climate Action Weeks, these are distinct from the Climate Weeks. The focus from the very beginning has been on action. So the Climate Action Weeks always embed culture. That's part of our DNA. So when we held Rio Climate Action Week, it started in the Museo de Maya, in the Museum of Science and Tomorrow and Culture, where everything comes together. So this is really fundamentally, it's about a way of working. This has got to be part of the new way of working. Policies are fantastic, resources are great, but we can still do it without all of those. We just have to change the way that we work much more collaboratively and creatively together. And the Climate Action Weeks definitely are a platform for embedding this and spreading this globally.
Ave, do you want to jump
Evidence, about evidence and science.
Thank you, Malini.
About evidence and science, that hopefully in IPCCR's 7 report, there are more authors who are indigenous persons, who are traditional community representatives, who are cultural heritage experts, than 0.0 something % that it was in the previous report.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment. Carlos, any words? We're about to close our session, but anything that you'd like to share with us?
A question, maybe.
Please.
Because I hear that arts has been part of the conversation the whole time. In one hand, in the other hand, like we are lacking being part of the conversation. Probably both are true. And if you're being part of the conversation and the problem is still alive, then are we contributing or not? Or if we were not, would it be even worse? So my remark is a question.
No, I think you emphasized an important point, and to Malini's point and to her previous remarks about the kind of the inclusion and integral inclusion throughout the time, we're still having the conversation. We're still not where it needs to be, and that, I think, points to the fact that we are doing a lot, but we still need to do a lot more. And I think both the integration of the local engagement and the local communities, the city level and kind of mobilization, and of course the inclusion into the policy landscape is fundamental. So we still have a lot to go, or a lot more to do from here on out, and we'll continue the dialogue. We're actually in the next session. I'll pass the microphone to Laila to take us into the next session. But we'll dive into the solutions and practical solutions that are currently being deployed around the world. But first and foremost, thank you, Carlos, Ave, Malini. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge and expertise, and also for being pioneers and stewards of culture, around the world, not just here at COP. So a big round of applause to our panelists, please. Thank you so much.